Nintendo's pretty much always had a good track record when it comes to launch titles for new hardware, and when it came time for them to release their brand new motion control-based console, the Wii, they needed a game that could really showcase what the console was all about. So upon release, Nintendo bundled with it a game that was not only genuinely fun and engaging, but one that became so popular and widely loved that it was one of the main reasons that most people, especially non-gamers, bought a Wii in the first place. Pretty much like everyone and their grandmas played Wii Sports. In fact, a good chunk of Nintendo Wiis are still sitting in various families' home media centers, collecting piles of dust because they bought it, played Wii Sports, and then never touched the console again. Whether this is a good or bad thing is up for debate, but it's undeniable that it aided greatly in the Wii's overall sales numbers. If you've been living under a rock and are somehow unaware, Wii Sports is a minigame compilation featuring 6 different sports, all centered around showcasing the motion controls of the Wii's controller. Anybody remember these stupid things? A bunch of different companies attempted to capitalize off the popularity of Wii Sports, but all these ridiculous peripherals really don't do anything more than make you look like an asshole, despite the amount of people who, for some reason, believe that it somehow improved their game. Now, I played this game a ton when the console first came out, but as time went on, I moved on to more fleshed out games, which the Wii did admittedly have a lot of. But I can't remember the last time I played Wii Sports, so I decided to revisit it. The first game on the list that you have the option to play is tennis, and let me tell you that over 12 years later, I finally figured out how to actually play it. I'll elaborate more on that in a bit. Now, normally, if you grew up with the Wii, you'd know that in all of these games, you get to play as the me you created for yourself upon first setting up your Wii console. But because I was playing this on a Wii U, for the sake of getting cleaner footage, I had no Miis made up, and I wasn't about to open up that can of worms because I wanted to get a head start on this video instead of wasting precious time slaving over a Mii, because God knows I would have fallen down that rabbit hole immediately. So instead, we're going with the stock Miis that you have to choose from, which unfortunately can't have their progress recorded. Although luckily, this allows me to start from square one, which is a good thing because if I had gone into this with my old save file, I wouldn't have been able to show the game off from the beginning. So let's go! At the start of a game, Wii Sports allows you to pick a dominant hand, which in and of itself is kind of a big deal because as far as I know, that hadn't really ever been a thing in games before. It makes sense considering it's all motion-based, but what surprises me most is that it lets you change it individually for each game mode, as opposed to just having a global setting for everything. Probably the first game ever to cater to my fellow cross-dominant brethren. Yep, cross-dominance, it's a thing. Look it up. I thought I was just bad at being right-handed. So if you've played like Mario Tennis, you kind of know what the deal is here. It's pretty much that, except motion-controlled. Like most of these games, the motion control aspect isn't really as prominent as the game would have you believe. It's more about flicking the Wii remote as opposed to actually swinging it like a racket. As I mentioned earlier though, it took me until now to actually figure out how to control it. For one simple reason. I thought the motion controls were more of a factor than they actually are. My issue was that, although hitting the ball when it was straight in front of me was easy, every time the ball headed for my Mii's backside, I would miss it. And that is because I was actually trying to swing the other way, like you would if you were holding a tennis racket. Well, that's not how you do it. What you're supposed to do is just keep flicking it in front of you, and it hits the ball just fine. 12 years later, and I'm just now realizing why I sucked at Wii Tennis. Also, didn't realize that when you play by yourself, the second character is controlled in the same way that extra flippers in a pinball machine work, and here I was wondering why my stupid teammate never did anything. After realizing this, I feel like I probably should have figured this out on my own a long time ago, but yeah, when you swing the Wii remote, whichever character is closer to the ball will swing. Oops. Once I corrected what I was doing wrong, the game became incredibly easy, and I'm sure if I sat there for a while, I could make it to pro status, which is another trait of all these games in Wii Sports. When you win matches, you start to rack up more and more points, which essentially raises your level. The higher your score is, the harder the matches become. And once you hit 1,000 points, you reach pro status, which grants you an indicator next to your name. And also bragging rights, I guess. Overall though, it's a pretty fun game. I just wish I knew how to fucking play it before. So the next sport we have is baseball. Now, as I can remember, this one did require a little more in terms of accuracy when hitting the ball, albeit still not much. Also, I think this game changes the rules of baseball, which did throw me off as I don't remember that being a thing. Now, I'm no baseball expert, but after you hit the ball, anywhere it goes, save for a foul, if anyone catches it before you make it to first base, you're out. Doesn't matter who catches it or if it hits the ground or not. I'm pretty sure that's not how baseball works. I assume they changed this to save time during games since you can't control anyone except the batter and pitcher anyway, but it still got annoying when I'd get a really good hit and still end up being out when I shouldn't have. And probably my favorite part of Wii Sports Baseball is seeing the goofy-ass legless Miis trotting across the field when it's time to switch sides, which further confuses me because the pitcher and batters have legs. It must be customary in me-land that playing other positions in baseball requires the amputation of your lower limbs, I guess. Now, the game does have some attempt at a metagame. There's different ways to throw the ball depending on how you either curve or aim the Wii Remote when pitching, and you can even throw fast or slow balls to throw off the batter. I'm not gonna say it works flawlessly, but I will commend them for trying to add some depth to it. Honestly though, it's just a simple game of baseball with a lot of the admittedly less fun aspects ripped out. And I know from experience because as a kid, the only fun part of baseball was either pitching or batting. The Wii Sports rendition is kind of fun, but nothing to really write home about. And absolutely nowhere near as captivating as the next game. Wii Sports Bowling, also known as the only reason most families ever turned on their Nintendo Wii. There's a quality Scott the Woz joke for you. Now there's no denying that this is the most notorious part of this entire game, and the one everyone seems to remember more than the rest. Much like everyone else, I got super hooked on this game back when I was younger, and I even won a Wii bowling tournament at my church's youth group. So I feel like I definitely have the credentials to be talking about the game. I'm not kidding, they really gave me a plastic bowling pin with my name on it, and I won a nice $25 gift certificate to Cheesecake Factory. It's a game that even the most lethargic of players can't help but stand up and give a shit for, and despite the fact that the game really isn't all that accurate at responding to the intricacies and nuances of actual motion, everyone seemed to think that they had their own little secret technique when it came to throwing the ball down the lane. You can adjust the direction of your throw, curve the ball, and influence the speed, but other than that, you're pretty much at the game's mercy. But all in all, the realism of the game is ultimately irrelevant because it's fun as hell and everyone has a grand old time playing it. Also, you can make an oops and throw the ball backwards, scaring the shit out of the spectating me's. I really don't think I've ever met a person who didn't like Wii Sports Bowling, save for the few people who somehow have never played it, because really, everyone and their grandma and dog has played this game, because that was exactly the point. The minigame was so popular that some people didn't even acknowledge that it was part of a bigger compilation of games. They just wanted to play Wii Bowling. And I guess that's a testament to just how fun this game was and quite frankly still is. Honestly, after playing this game again for the first time in years, I implore you, next time you decide to have a game night or even you're just looking for something to do with some friends, bust some Wii Sports Bowling out. It's pretty unlikely that you'll have a bad time. We've reached the only truly frustrating game of the whole bunch, and it's entirely due to the fact that it relies so heavily on the motion controls which lack the accuracy to properly play the game. Now, golf video games like Mario Golf and Golden Tee are pretty fun, and this would be too, except for the fact that the way you control it completely breaks the game. Now, I wouldn't say it's unplayable, because even at its worst, Wii Sports is fun to play with friends or family, but as a game itself, this just doesn't do what they wanted it to do. See, in games like Mario Golf, there's typically a meter that shows on screen when you swing at the ball. You wait for the meter to get to a certain point, and then you press a button to determine the force at which you hit the ball. This lets you strike the ball at different velocities, which gives you control over where it will land. Conversely, a game like Golden Tee uses a rolling ball as a controller, which operates akin to basically an old-school ball mouse. You roll the ball with varying speed to determine how hard you'll hit the in-game ball. Both of these methods work pretty well, and it gives you good control over the game. Wii Sports, however, does not have either of these. Instead, it has very inaccurate motion controls which hinder most playability of the game. See, with all the other games in Wii Sports, you don't really need to control distance, at least not to this degree, and much less accuracy is required overall. You could argue that baseball needs you to control how far you hit the ball, but because of the comparatively smaller size of a baseball field, there's far less variables involved. This game has you driving and putting and expects way more of you than you can actually deliver. On this one hole, I drove my ball into the water about 800 times because despite the fact that the game says I can make the ball go further, if I swung the Wii Remote any harder, it would fly across the room and break my goddamn TV. Eventually, I racked up so many extra swings that I just gave up and kept flinging the ball into the water until it forced me to give up. Wii Sports Golf is not a great game. The last up is boxing. When I was younger, this was probably my second favorite one, and the only other game that I got pro status in besides bowling. In this one, you use both the Wii Remote and nunchuck this time, and not unlike the other games, the motion controls are used to adjust the way you throw your punches. You can also hold the Wii Remote and nunchuck up to block incoming punches, but doing this leaves your torso open, in which case you can move them both back and forth to influence how your body moves. And that's pretty much the entire depth of the game. It's all a matter of throwing the right punches at the right time. Also, the motion controls allow you to do this. Being that there's no rumble, it still shocks me how they managed to pull this off, and now that I think about it, it's probably the sound effects, but making contact with punches feels super satisfying. I always thought so years ago, and going back to it now, it's still just as satisfying. You can play solo or split screen against a friend. If the motion controls were a little more accurate, I'm sure I'd like it more, but because they aren't super accurate, the harder the enemies get, the more frustrating it gets to play. But it's definitely manageable. And I do remember breaking a sweat quite a few times when I was a kid playing this game. I'm not kidding. It's a pretty good workout once you get to the later hard enemies. That's pretty much all I have to say about Wii Sports as a whole. So many years have gone by that I forgot how enjoyable this game really is. Despite its inherent flaws, it's still a pretty fun game to play, especially if you can manage to get a group of people together. I have no earthly idea how to end this video, so hey, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, maybe go ahead and click that like button and subscribe to see more. If you want to see more right now, there's a couple videos right there you can check out. And if you want to help me not die, my Patreon link is right there.